Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Good to see you. I didn't plan on making a video today, but here we are. Plans, the best laid plans, right? This is a video that, honestly, I've been thinking about a lot of this stuff for a while, and I've mentioned some of it before, but there was something that happened today that kind of brought it up, and I'm like, screw it. I just need to make a video and talk about this. And I'll be referencing some other things that I've made, other things that I've said, or whatever, and I'll link those to you in the comments or description or whatever. But I'm really going to try and synthesize a few different things here, and I'm trying to tee up, a conversation about some things I'm really worried about, some things that, imagine that someone being worried about something in 2020, right? And some, just, I guess the trajectory of things. What's funny is the only thing I planned on doing for today was I went back and watched my video that I made for 9/11 last year, and I'm like, all right, past self, you said everything that present self would say. And so I just reshared that on my locals, and I think maybe on my Facebook. I should put it on my Twitter as well. But either way, I made some claims and some predictions and put some thoughts out there about the trajectory that I saw society heading in terms of our cohesion and our unity, our ability to coalesce, kind of like we did after 9/11. And the things I'm going to be talking about here are kind of in that same vein, although I would recommend you going and watching my 9/11 video as well. But this is more of just some of the broader social issues, pathologies that we've seen. And like I said, I've talked about some of them, but I've never really laid out this stuff, particularly with Brandolini's law and some of the issues with, fact checking and so on and so forth. So I'm going to try and synthesize a few things here. We'll see how I do. You can let me know in the comments. So first of all, I will say that go Chiefs, by the way, right? The Chiefs game, I think I probably should at least mention something about the NFL season opener last night. Chiefs won. We played the Houston Texans. Texans defense did a really good job, had some great stops. I thought that, honestly, the offense for the Texans did a really good job as well. I was, wasn't sure what to expect out of Deshaun Watson, but he did a really good job. He had one drive in particular that was just phenomenal. He was releasing the ball really fast, but ultimately the Chiefs did what they do, and Patrick Mahomes brought us to victory. So it was a good game. There are a lot of people, I think I posted about this on Facebook, but, they did a thing before the game. They had, Still We Rise, I think, and it basically was portrayed as like a national anthem and then like a black national anthem. And at least that's the way it was discussed in a lot of the media. And, I do think that there's a lot of issues with that, especially with, if we're talking about, what does that really communicate to people, that there is the national anthem, but then black people have their own national anthem, so therefore they're not part of this land of the free and home of the brave kind of thing. And so, I think there's some issues with that. But generally speaking, there was definitely an emphasis on unity. There was a ceremony that they did kind of at the beginning that was to demonstrate unity, where the Houston Texans and the Chiefs locked arms. It started with Pat Mahomes and Deshaun Watson locking arms, and we'll talk more about that here in a little bit because it has to do with what I'm mentioning here. But generally speaking, it wasn't near as bad as I thought it was going to be. I think I set my expectations pretty low, to be honest, and I thought they did a good job. And I'm just glad football's back, to be honest. I'm just glad to be able to watch some football, and I know that it's going to be difficult to avoid the politicizing of all this stuff, but I am just excited to be watching Chiefs football again. I think there are some things they could have done that I was said, okay, screw this, I'll just watch the highlights, but this didn't meet that threshold for me. And so anyway, go Chiefs. So what we're going to be discussing here, the first part, is this thing called Brandolini's law, and I posted about it on my locals before, but I think it's really relevant today. And it's kind of a joke, but really not really. But it's also called the bullshit asymmetry principle, and it's basically emphasizes the difficulty required to debunk or refute some BS, as opposed to the amount of effort to just say something that's total BS. It's kind of a another way, or a further explanation or expanding on that whole a lie makes its way around the world before truth ever gets its shoes on kind of thing. They also quote here in the Wikipedia article about this Russian guy who posted an essay, and I really like this explanation, where he says basically, if you have a lie that's one text or phrase, it requires a paragraph to dispute. And if you have a paragraph of misinformation, it requires a section. If you have a section, it requires a chapter. If you have a chapter, it requires a book. If you have a book, it requires a whole volume of books, and so on and so forth. So it's that order of magnitude to debunk something that is not true, especially, I think I've written and spoke about this before, but if something is sticky and it meets the requirements for a sticky idea or a viral idea, then it's going to be even harder to debunk it. And so I'm going to get into some examples of this and why it's relevant. And I hate that I don't have to, but I still feel like it's important because I really try to be consistently principled on these things. A lot of the examples I'm going to be using here are examples of this on the left, but you can find a plethora of them on the right, and I'll give some examples of them later. But these are just some of the more relevant ones because they're really timely right now. But I kind of want to just look at a few things that are BS and the asymmetry between the BS and what's required to debunk it, and then we'll kind of transition into the broader issue that I see going forward here. So here's the ad that Joe Biden made for his initial campaign launch. This aired on April 25th, 2019. And we're just going to look at one specific part that he mentions here. So he makes a truth claim. We're going to talk about truth claims here a lot. And so we're going to look at a truth claim Joe Biden makes and then kind of discuss, is that true? But just understand this video, this is so important. This video is not about me debunking whatever thing from the left or dunking on this thing or anything like that. I'm just using some examples here, and so I'll expand on that later. But if you're seeing this and going, oh God, this is him just trying to do some kind of right-wing pandering or something like that, that's not the case. These are just really, really, really relevant examples right now, but there are certainly things you can find in the past that come from the other side of the ideological spectrum.
And that's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world.
He's talking about Charlottesville here, by the way, the Charlottesville, when the car drives into the crowd and the neo-Nazis and tiki torches and stuff.
And shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides? With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it.
What's crazy is that this is a little over a year and a half ago, and how different, this is a thought I just had, and how different Joe Biden's his cognitions and his ability to talk about things. I know this is scripted and other stuff, they're reading off teleprompters, but you can just see the decline, man. It's really sad. Anyway, so he's talking about this very fine people hoax, and Scott Adams has talked a lot about this before. And again, my point isn't to try and debunk it, but I just kind of want to give some examples. So if you were to say, President Trump called neo-Nazis, if you were to even say that's two words, fine people. So that's 7 words. That's 7 words. And here's the press conference that this fine people hoax is taken from. And I'm just going to play a few clips from it that show that this is obviously not the case. And I'm trying to emphasize a broader point. I'm not sitting here trying to play defense for Donald Trump, but true is true and false is false. And what Joe Biden said here is false. But think about how long it took him. So I think I started that clip from his campaign thing at maybe 15. I think it was 15.
In the United States.
So let's say it was 1:14, and then it played for about 25 seconds. So even Joe Biden expanding on that is 25 seconds for him to make the claim that the president called neo-Nazis fine people. Okay, so that's 25 seconds.
I've condemned neo-Nazis. I've condemned many different groups.
So this is that same press conference for the fine people thing. And that's the first part of it. So that's important to mention. So the whole press conference, as you can see, is about 17 minutes. But this statement comes before the fine people statement, which is the section we're about to look at here. I wrote it down. Okay, 5:45. And I'll put links to all this. You can watch it. And at the beginning of it, he talks about how there's violence on both sides. So that's totally true. But listen, we're going to watch this part here. And I'm kind of debunking it, but I'm really trying to show how much time is required to talk about Brandolini's law here, the time and effort required to debunk something. And then again, we'll get into the implications here in a minute.
Accurately, you would say.
Neo-Nazis started this. They showed up in Charlottesville. They showed up in Charlottesville to protest.
Excuse me. They didn't make themselves down as neo, and you had some very bad people in that group. but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people.
So there's the very fine people on both sides. And we're going to play this, but I want you to hear less than a minute into this part. Hear what he says, okay? So he says, neo-Nazis weren't the ones who signed up to be there, you know, and he talks about the permit later. And he says, and you did have some bad people there, but you also had, so he draws a distinction. But again, look at all the effort that it takes. President Trump called neo-Nazis fine people. 7 words, 7 words.
In that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
Washington and Robert E. Lee are not the same.
No, George Washington was a slave owner.
This part's
Was
actually
George
pretty
Washington a slave
on his
owner?
part.
So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him?
I do love
Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing his.
I didn't mean to expand that out there. That part's particularly prescient, but either way, listen to this part. So we're at 50 seconds, at 6:50. So he made the very fine comment at 6 minutes, and he goes on. He's talking about statues, and he says here, you're changing statues, you're changing history, you're changing culture, and listen to what he says.
History, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the
So he says, and you have people. Here's who I'm not talking about.
neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats.
I've never seen anyone in.
You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
Treated unfairly, sir. I'm sorry. I just didn't understand what you were saying. You were saying the press has treated white nationalists unfairly?
No,
I just didn't understand what you were saying.
No. There were people in that rally, and I looked the night before. If you look, there were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. I'm sure in that group there were some bad ones. The following day, it looked like they had some rough, bad people, neo-Nazis, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them. But you had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest and very legally protest because, you know, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit. So I only tell you this. There are two sides to a story. I thought what took place was a horrible moment for our country, a horrible moment. But there are two sides to the country. Does anybody?
Okay, so, and then he goes on, and again, I can link this, but look at the amount of effort just to me here saying, okay, Joe Biden spent 25 seconds, which is longer than he needed to reiterate this fine people hoax for his campaign launch video. And just me playing that, he condemns neo-Nazis at the beginning. He goes on and he condemns neo-Nazis. He goes on and explains, look, no, there are people who were there doing this bad stuff. Then there are these other people that are just there protesting statues. And those people the night before especially were prevalent. But the next day, there were more bad people. Like he said neo-Nazis, whatever you want to call them. But there were people, and I'm not talking about neo-Nazis. So anyway, my point is that think about Brandolini's law. President Trump called neo-Nazis fine people. How much effort is required here? How much effort is required here? So let's go on to something else that's in the news right now. We have the stuff with the Bob Woodward's tapes of, President Trump, says he was deliberately deceptive about the coronavirus and all this other stuff. And this isn't one I want to particularly get into a lot of the minutia on. But if you look at what the WHO was saying at the time and other stuff, which I'll give you these links as well, you see that this is actually kind of a non-story story. Here's Joe Biden saying it's life and death betrayal. They shred him over the revelations that President Trump downplayed. And he said it in the Woodward tapes. So here we go. President Trump downplayed coronavirus severity, maybe something like that, or dangers. So that's 6 words, right? 6 words. that's kind of been making the rounds. And he did. He said, I wanted to play it down. I still want to play it down so I don't cause a panic. That's what Trump said in the interview. Now, the other part is he was saying that publicly as well. But look at this. So that's 6 words. Here you have Andrew Klavan of Daily Wire spending 9 minutes on that topic of explaining it, 6 words. And here you have Ben Shapiro. He spent in this entire episode debunking the Woodward tapes. He goes on and on and on, and he shows what Democratic politicians were saying at the time and all this other stuff. And he spends 57 minutes debunking President Trump downplayed coronavirus dangers, or what's the other one? Trump lied, people died. That's 4 words. It's 4 words. The order of magnitude required to debunk them. Shapiro spends an entire episode. Klavan spends 9 minutes. I'm sure lots of other right-wing sources. Here's another one. Dr. Fauci, he did an interview on Fox News because no one else is going to ask him this question. But here's just 1 minute and 24 seconds. And actually, we don't even need that full time of him addressing this, showing how this is not a story. This is not a story.
You were there through that whole thing. Was that the playbook, or was that the president just going his own direction?
I don't think so, John. I mean, I don't recall anything different than in our discussions that we had with the president, that he said things quite similar publicly. So I didn't read the book. I didn't really go over any of the text since it just came out. But, when in my discussions and the discussions of other task force members with the president, we're talking about the reality of what was going on. And then when we would get up in front of the press conferences, which were very, very common after our discussions with the president, he really didn't say anything different than we discussed when we were with him. So I may not be tuned into the right thing that they're talking about, but I didn't really see any discrepancies between what he told us and what we told him and what he ultimately came out publicly and said.
So did you get a sense that he was or wasn't playing this down?
President Trump downplayed coronavirus dangers, panic, whatever. Trump lied, people died.
No, I didn't. I didn't get any sense that he was distorting anything. I mean, in my discussions with him, they were always straightforward about the concerns that we had. We related that to him. And when he would go out and I'd hear him discussing the same sort of things, he would often say, we just got through with a briefing with the group from the task force, and would talk about it. So
anyway, again, Trump lied, people died. That's 4 words, 6 words. Trump downplayed coronavirus panic, which again, he said, I wanted to downplay it. So that's not some lie. That's not misinformation. But the question is, did he downplay it in some way that was misleading? Was what he was saying, different than what the experts in them were talking about? And here's Dr. Fauci saying, no, there was no discrepancies between what we talked about in the briefings and what he said out there. But it's, again, how much effort here is in me to Trump's deliberate coronavirus deception, right? And so the point is that there is an asymmetry between how much is required. Shapiro dedicated an entire episode to these Woodward tapes. You think anyone from the left or anyone who has already agreed that the Woodward tapes show some type of revelation is going to watch 57 minutes of Ben Shapiro debunking that? Are you kidding me? Of course not. Of course not. Then here is the one from today that got me. Kansas City Chiefs fans, as you could imagine, booed during moment of unity for ongoing fight for equality mars NFL home opener. It's a nasty and embarrassing moment, and it marred the victory and all this other stuff. So football season kicks off with fewer fans, calls for social justice. Again, like I mentioned, so I watched the game live. I didn't hear any boos or anything like that. And I was seeing they're reporting on this today and about how it says there was a moment of silence and they were saying it takes all of us. But it says boos could be clearly heard from significant portions of the nearly 16,000 fans in attendance. Now, I'm going to briefly tell you what I observed in watching some of the videos, and from what I put a call out to some people who were there at the game, and I said, tell me what you experienced. And the claim has been, here's what I've been told. So they did these 2 different national anthems, and the Houston Texans stayed in the locker room for both. And then where the Houston Texans were running out on the field, which was when they were when the Chiefs were already going out to the field, and we're talking about this doing this moment of silence. Chiefs fans booed because Houston Texans came out. Obviously, duh, that's what you do at a football game. And then, so that's one argument for hearing boos. But I've read and talked to multiple people who are at the game, and they say that's not what happened. Like, people booed whenever the Houston Texans came out, but the moment of silence, there wasn't any. And then there's a video we're about to watch. It's 45 seconds. All right, 45 seconds of some of that moment of unity stuff. And you hear some people start whenever they say they're going to do the moment of unity. Now, one thing you need to know about Arrowhead Stadium, I've been there, is that when people yell Chiefs, it's not Chiefs. It's Chiefs. It's very loud, and it's also very deep. So what you can hear is people yelling Chiefs like that, but it sounds like this deep kind of bellowing throughout the stadium, but you don't hear anyone going boo, anything like that. Now, one thing you do hear in the video is so they're doing the moment of silence, and it's silent, and then a few people are like, let's play some football, let's play. And then you hear some other people like cheering, let's go Andy Reid, Chiefs coach. And then some other people, like, you can't tell, maybe they could be booing. I don't hear the word boo specifically, but they could be booing the people who are shouting during the moment of silence. But then you also could just be hearing people going, Chiefs, like that. And then they all applaud and everything. So it was a 45-second video, but moment of silence. Silent.
Thank you.
So again, I can hear an argument for someone saying that there was boos, but it's a lot simpler than that. Now, how much time did it take for me to just even attempt to kind of debunk? I mean, I could show you clips. I can show you like firsthand accounts of people that were there, but how much time does it take for me to debunk Chiefs fans boo during moment of unity? Seven words to confirm. That just shows how much more we need these moments, right? Is because there was all these people booing during the moment of silence dedicated, to fighting equality or inequality or whatever. So back to Brandolini's law, the asymmetry. So, I mean, again, if someone said, so you can take this from either side, right? Barack Obama isn't or is not a U.S. citizen, 7, or United States citizen, 8, right? Or Barack Obama is a Muslim, 5 words. That we have these things that have happened on the right as well. So again, the left doesn't have some type of monopoly on BS that also follows Brandolini's law and the asymmetry to debunk it. Okay, so no ideological side has a monopoly on this. But the problem with this is it plays into the broader issue. So I made a video about this, I think maybe a week ago, could be more, called "Are We Gaslighting Each Other?" And the reason why I give these examples and I'm building this case is in that video I talk about how I think both the left and the right have legitimate claims to perceiving that they're being gaslit. And the reason for that is because they're both operating within different silos of information that create for them different perspectives of reality. So if you're on the left, you're getting this one set of information that confirms your biases. So you have this perception of reality. If you're on the right, you're getting this set of information that confirms this perception of reality. And if you're on the left and you encounter a countervailing data point or some discordant information that doesn't accord with your perception of reality, you're going to say, I'm being gaslit because I know that's not true. And if you're on the right, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to say, I know that's not true. Why? Well, because I have this entirely different perception of reality than you do. Anyway, go and watch the video. It's worth watching. And I was, and just kind of an anecdote to kind of, I guess, highlight this. I was talking to someone today, someone I respect a lot, and we were talking about media and media information and disinformation. It was a really good conversation, super good conversation. And they were making some truth claims about some things. And I said, well, hold on. Because some of them were truth claims. I'm like, yeah, that checks out. And others were things that I'm like, that does not align with objective reality, just like with statistical reality. Not that you can always trust every spin on statistics, but either way, I said, where are you getting that information? Where's that coming from? And they said, well, I said, have you like researched this on your own? If so, like, what are the sources? I said, well, just news, stuff I read in the news. And then they went on to tell me about how they try to get a diverse, news, or a diverse set of news sources to help kind of build their schema for what's true or not. And they said the New York Times, another newspaper, and NPR, I believe, CNN, and then the Washington Post, or not Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal. And I said, really, the Wall Street Journal is the only varied information set there. The rest are all going to give you the same. And they were like, well, that's your opinion, which is fine. Yeah, that's totally fine. But it'd be kind of like if I said, I really try to get a variety of information. So first I go to Fox News, then I check out Daily Wire, then I head over to the Federalist, then I see what Breitbart has to say about it. And then lastly, I see if Rush Limbaugh has weighed in on the issue. So I got 5 sources there, right? So that's 5 different, well, no, that's 5, but it's going to give me one perspective probably, right? And so that's the problem. So whenever I'm looking at these different, so we have Brandolini's law that says, if you have a thing that's BS, which if you're operating in an echo chamber, you're probably getting a lot of BS that confirms your biases. But the amount of information required to debunk that BS is going to take so much time and energy that you're not even going to want to engage with it. People are getting these perceptions of reality that are being constructed for them largely by the media. So where am I going with this? Well, the thing I've been thinking about, and this is something I talked a little bit about in my episode with Kevin the other day about the upcoming election, is one of the predictions I made in April was about this notion of fact-checking the debates. Whenever it became clear that Joe Biden was going to be the presumptive nominee, people were saying, well, Trump might be down in the polls now, but as soon as they have the debates, then he'll really tear into Joe Biden and he has an advantage in the debates and he'll be fine. And then you had other people saying, well, because of that, maybe they won't debate at all. Maybe Joe Biden will just refuse to debate. And I did a whole Twitter thread on this yesterday, just for posterity, saying, well, here's the issues with that. And there are a lot of people I respect that are, smart people who are going with this binary, will they debate or won't they debate? And I'm like, well, hold on a second. That hasn't been the news media's binary for the past 4 years. Do I cover something honestly or do I not cover it at all? That hasn't been the binary. Instead, it's what lens can I apply? And I talk in the Twitter thread, I talk about how they put their thumb on the scale of truth to try and tilt it in different directions. And again, this is on the left and on the right, but big tech and the legacy media are predominantly dominated by the left. But obviously it does happen on the right as well. And I've given numerous instances of that and in other videos where I've talked about that. Okay. But my point was, no, they will debate, but they'll just find a lens to apply. And what they'll do is they'll fact check the debates. And there's an issue with that. So here's the issue with the fact checking generally. And then we'll get to the debate part. I realize I got a little bit ahead of myself here. So on the topic of fact checking, what's a fact check? What's a fact check? It's a response to a truth claim on whether or not that truth claim lines up with reality. It's, is that a fact or is it not a fact, right? Does what you just said, is it in accord with reality as we understand it? Well, again, go back and watch my video on gaslighting. We have 2 different perspectives on what is reality, and a lot of that's being shaped by our news media. So we have CNN's lead fact checker here saying the DNC didn't warrant a fact check and there was more dishonesty at the RNC. Here's a relevant quote. There were a few items that were where they missed context and maybe a bit of misleading, but there was not a parade of false claims like we had tonight. And what he's talking about is, he says that there was more falsehoods in the first night of the RNC than the entire DNC combined. And, really the DNC had a few things here and there, but it wasn't a big thing. NBC fact-checked every single night of the debates. MSNBC did. So did CNN. not the debates, sorry, the RNC, and they didn't really pay much attention to the DNC. Well, here's from the DNC, okay? Here's a clip, one part of Joe Biden's speech from the DNC, just a little part, okay? Just a little part, but it's relevant.
Just a week ago yesterday was the 3rd anniversary of the events in Charlottesville. Close your eyes. Remember what you saw on television. Remember seeing those neo-Nazis and Klansmen and white supremacists coming out of fields with lighted torches, veins bulging, spewing the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s. Remember the violent clash that ensued between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it. And remember what the president said when asked? He said there were, quote, very fine people on both sides. It was a wake-up call for us as a country, and for me, a call to action. At that moment, I knew I'd have to run.
Very fine people on both sides. Again, same thing. So there's Joe Biden reiterating the same thing that he put in his initial campaign launch video. And that is, it's an egregious mischaracterization. I'm sorry guys, but it is. It's an egregious mischaracterization of the president's words and what happened there. There is no two ways about it. There is no two ways about it. Now go back to this. DNC fact checker. There wasn't anything, no falsehoods put at the DNC. It's perfectly valid that the president called neo-Nazis fine people, right? So that's this silo, this perception of reality that CNN is going to forward. And then there's another perception of reality on the other side. So going to the debates, going to fact checking, here's the problem. What I had said before, like I said in April, was I predicted that they would have the debates, but they would just live fact check them. Now I said that in April. It seemed to me that it was obvious that was what was going to happen. But instead, a lot of the big names out there were saying, no, it's will they have the debates or won't they have the debates? You know, I think that's a really naive perspective. And of course, I think I was right here. But so what happened is that Nancy Pelosi recently, maybe 2.5, 3 weeks ago, said, well, no, don't tell Joe Biden. But this is a little bit of that art of the deal almost. I don't know. You know, I don't think Donald Trump is the person who mastered lowballing people. But anyway, but I think Nancy Pelosi threw out the lowball offer, which was don't tell Biden, but he shouldn't even legitimize it by having a debate. That's your lowball. That's your lowball. But Biden so comes in with the desired price and he says, well, you know, I still will, but I'll be a fact checker on the floor. And here's a relative quote. In a separate interview on MSNBC, Biden said he's going to be a fact checker on the floor during the debates, and he thinks the media will fact check Trump as well. Here's the article that Kevin and I talked about briefly in that last video. This is from Forbes 5 days after that AP article. Biden proposes instant fact checking crawler for debate with Trump. And see, he says specifically brushing up on Trump's multiple lies and proposed a crawler on the screens to fact check. So again, I'm laying the case that there are two perceptions of reality, and a fact check is a way of dealing with a truth claim, right? And the amount of effort it takes to debunk a truth claim that's false is of an order of magnitude larger than the BS itself. And whenever we're looking forward to the debates, and then I'll get to my final point here in a second, we're going to have encounters with truth claims, and we're going to have very different reactions to those truth claims. So here's an article from Real Clear Investigations about a month ago. The troubling fact is that the media's fact checkers tend to lean left. I'm going to put a link to this in here. You can investigate it on your own. Cheryl Atkinson is not some kind of crazy partisan or anything by any stretch, but you can engage, decide for yourself. By the way, if this said fact checkers lean to the right, that's also a problem. All right. So this is not about, again, if that said to the right, just as big of a problem. These examples, yes, a lot of my use have to do with the left, but those are just the most pressing ones right now. Like they're the most relevant ones right now. There's lots of other things we can get into that have to do with the right. And I'll kind of touch on them here in a second whenever I get to this final quote But either way, this is the problem with the fact checks. We have two different perceptions of reality, largely substantiated and created by like the bias confirmation of the different media outlets and media silos where people get their information. I talked about this in this other video, and I talk about this a lot, and I'll keep talking about it, is that the media switched their model probably early in the 90s. So it used to be, media was like beer. They had the blandest, most, flavor to try and appeal to everyone. And then we had things like CMT, country music television. So that's one, you're catering to one audience there. BET, Black Entertainment Television, Lifetime television for women, so on and so forth. And so TV channels started to cater to specific audiences. The news media followed suit. The news media followed suit with that. So they said, well, who's our target demographic? And we're just going to tailor the information we give and the way we talk about things to that one demographic. So if you're on the left, you're going to watch MSNBC, CNN, whatever, and you're only going to hear criticisms of the right. You're never going to hear real criticisms of the left. And if you're on the right, you're going to watch Fox News, listen to Rush Limbaugh, whatever, and you're only going to hear criticisms of the left, and you're not going to really hear any substantive criticisms of the right. And so it creates this siloing effect. But part of that, the implication again, is it creates two different perceptions of reality. Well, how does a fact check work? How does a fact check on a truth claim work if we can't even agree on what's true? And this gets me to my final point. Here's a quote from, there's a great book by Jonathan Haidt called The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. It's a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. But he lays out this kind of dichotomy here of the way people engage with truth claims. And he says, quote, the social psychologist Tom Gilovic studies the cognitive mechanisms of strange beliefs. His simple formulation is that when we want to believe something, we ask ourselves, can I believe it? Then, as Kuhn and Perkins found, we search for supporting evidence, and if we find even a single piece of pseudo evidence, we can stop thinking. So if you hear a truth claim that you want to believe, you go, well, can I believe that? And you try to find something to grasp onto that confirms that belief, and then now you're set. I don't have to think about it anymore. And then he says we have a justification in case anyone asks. In contrast, when we don't want to believe something, we ask ourselves, must I believe it? And then we search for contrary evidence. And if we find a single reason to doubt the claim, we can dismiss it. So it's really just an exercise in bias confirming or rejecting discordant claims, right? So it's asking, can I believe that? Versus, must I believe that? Do I have to believe that? And then, accepting or dismissing things accordingly. Now, if we have these wildly different perceptions of reality, and if you have a truth claim that you want to believe, and if it's BS, and it takes a lot to debunk BS, which it does take a lot to debunk BS in a lot of cases, then it's just easier to buy into the BS truth claim. It's easier to buy into it. I had an example of this earlier today. I saw someone posted something on Facebook that said that Joe Biden, who is a lifeguard and a football player, or some athlete of some sort, that he was able to get out of the draft 5 times by claiming that he had asthma. And I just asked one simple question. I said, is this true? And they said, from everything I've seen, it is. And I said, can you provide me with sources? And they've yet to provide me with any sources. That's an example of something that someone looked at and said, can I believe that? And they're like, yeah, of course I can believe that. I don't like Joe Biden. Click, share, okay, whatever. And this, again, it happens on the left because I'm seeing the stuff for the Woodward, the very fine people, everything. It happens on the left. So both sides have siloed off, and we're no longer asking. So what you could ask in response to a truth claim is it true? Is it true? But instead, people are asking, can I believe it if I want to, or must I believe it if I don't want to? And you can always find something to confirm your biases. It's a really, really, really dangerous place to be. So again, with the fact checking, with the debates, we're going to run into a lot of issues there if you have kind of an asymmetry between the way they fact check Donald Trump and how they fact check Joe Biden. That's going to be an issue in and of itself. And I've got a lot of concerns there. But broadly speaking, we're moving towards the election. And there will be a truth claim made when it comes to the outcome of the election. The truth claim will be so-and-so won and so-and-so lost. And how either side or both sides deal with those truth claims is going to be informed by their various perceptions of reality. And if we're in a situation where our perceptions of reality have established that if our side loses, it's illegitimate. That is a really freaking dangerous place to be. It's a really dangerous place to be. And I wrote about this during the impeachment. I don't know if you remember this. There was an impeachment that if Trump loses, then the right will say this is illegitimate because they had this impeachment and it tanked his reputation or something like that. And if the left loses, if Joe Biden loses at that time, we didn't know who the nominee was going to be. But if Trump wins, that the left will say, well, it's because he got off in this impeachment. And both sides are going to say it's illegitimate. Now we have a situation where it's, if Trump wins, it's because they, locked up mailboxes and all this other stuff. And the media rigged it with the true fact checking on the debates and all this other stuff. And it's an illegitimate outcome if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris win. And if Donald Trump wins, it'll be because, if Donald Trump wins, it'll be because of the mail fraud or whatever, and how they locked up the mail. And people on the right now are saying that if Biden loses, it'll be because of the stuff with the post office. Anyway, you get the point. You know the thing. I love that I have that meme to lean on anytime I stumble over words or something. You know the thing. The point is that both sides will have in their minds legitimate truth claims to cling on to because I can believe it, right? Because I can believe it when it comes to the outcome of the election, if their side loses. And it's so, so dangerous. And the other thing is that a lot of the misinformation that people believe, if you think about false beliefs that people might have, really the consequences of believing something false are really only a big deal to the degree that they're a big deal. So an example that comes to my mind, this is probably not a very good example, but whatever, is let's say you believed some kind of rare and exotic fruit that isn't at your grocery store or anything like that is actually poisonous or something like that, is it has some bizarre properties that isn't true, but you believe that's true. That doesn't really butt up with your day-to-day life, and so that doesn't have a lot of consequences, right? But if you're at some type of dinner party with your boss or the president of the company you work for, something like that, and they happen to be serving that exotic fruit, now you might freak out. The degree in which you really believe it's poison, you might be like Dwight in that episode of The Office where Jim is sending him faxes from the future, knocking the coffee out of Stanley's hand. Either you get the reference or you don't. You might freak out because you think that's poison and cause a scene and then get fired from your job. So you can believe lots of things that aren't true, and it's really only a big deal to the degree in which it butts up against actual reality or your day-to-day life. Now, the reason I say that is because if you just exist in these silos of your own, perceptions and your own echo chambers, believing things that aren't true isn't that big of a deal. But we're all going to engage with the truth claim of the results of the election on November 4th or whenever they come in, who knows? And so people are going to butt up against that. And I'm just really worried about the foundation that's been laid for both sides to have in their mind. If you're on the left, I can understand why you would think that the election was stolen from you. And if you're on the right, I can understand why you would think the election was stolen from you. And I think both sides are wrong if you hold that belief. At least if you just hold that belief uniformly and there's no nuance to it. But either way, that's going to be so dangerous. It's such a problem that can I believe it versus must I believe it? Or is it true versus, do I have to believe it kind of thing? So here's my conclusion. I was, thinking about this earlier, and I'm like, I just need to have my closing monologue to every video be something along the lines of, I don't really have an answer, guys. I'm sorry. But I really don't have an answer except to say something that I've said a lot. Which is, I think that it's incumbent on us. I hate our media class, and our political class are, in a lot of ways, is very broken as well. But they're both, Andrew Breitbart had that quote, politics is downstream from culture. I think Ravi Zacharias said it really well, that politicians don't create culture, culture creates politicians. And so all of this, I think, falls on us. It's incumbent on us to try and be intentional about how we engage with truth claims. And again, because of Brandolini's law, it's so much easier. It's so much easier to just accept something that confirms your biases, as opposed to saying, is that really true? And being willing to just stand on principle and stand on truth, as opposed to standing on tribalism and bias confirmation and so on and so forth. So the thing I would leave you with is be willing to ask, is it true? Is that true? And then maybe a follow-up is, what does that mean if it is true? Or what does it mean if it's not true? What does it mean if it's not true? Be willing to ask that. Don't just try and go, well, can I believe that? Can I believe that? Does it confirm my biases? Does it make me feel like I'm smart and I have it figured out? Or do I have to believe that? Can I find something that disagrees with it that I can latch on to and therefore say I don't have to think about it anymore? Don't do that. Don't do that. I know it's easier, guys. I know that it's easier to just lean into our own biases. It's really difficult. I fall into that category as well quite often. But it's not, the question isn't, do people like to have their biases confirmed? It's, have you trained yourself to fight against that inclination? So I really encourage you to train yourself to fight against that inclination, because when it comes to these debates, we're going to run into that a lot. We're going to run into that a lot. And then when it comes to the election, we are really going to run into that, because we're going to have a big truth claim that we're all going to have to engage with. And I'm gravely worried. I'm gravely worried, guys, about the consequences of how either side deals with that, because they've been told by their respective, bias confirming, reality creating entities that if the other side wins, it's illegitimate. That the other side wins, it's illegitimate. And it's a really dangerous place to be. It's a really dangerous place to be, guys. So that's my encouragement to you. I'll link you to all of these different things here. I don't really have anything else other than say, go Chiefs. I'm glad we beat the Texans. Let's keep it going. It was actually a pleasant surprise to see that football was back. I was quite happy to see that. And so, yeah, that's it. If this is the kind of thing you're into, please like, share, and subscribe. That's on YouTube at Return to Reason. Follow me on Twitter. That's at My Mundane Mind. And then the big place I'd love for you guys to come and join is at my locals page, returntoreason.locals.com. We're building a community over there. I have some really interesting conversations going on right now. There is a conversation with a woman who, she grew up under communism. Her parents, she's a Polish native, and she grew up under communism. So did her husband, and they experienced the effects of living under communism. And then they moved here, and she has some really interesting insights into that. And so I've had an ongoing dialogue with her. And so and there's other stuff going on. Of course, there you can post your own stuff. You can post your own links to articles, memes, recipes, whatever you want to do. I don't have any Stripe account attached to it, so you can just join it for free. Just create an account, join it at the end. So I would strongly encourage you to go over and join my locals community as well. I have stuff posted at Medium and on ThinkSpot and all the other places. The thing, Spotify, whatever. So yeah. If that's what you're into, I'd really encourage I would appreciate your support. And I'd love it if you shared all the other stuff as well. That's it. We're going to have more stuff coming. But in the meantime, stay classy, be good to each other, and I will see you next time. Peace.